Finally, I've made a ranged rogue build for Diablo 4 that works, because usually melee builds for rogue are much stronger, but this one that I'm going to show you is actually really good. So let's see what it is, and let's begin with the abilities that we are using. The first skill is Forceful Arrow. So we are basically sending an arrow that deals damage and every third cast makes enemies vulnerable, and additionally has 15% increased critical strike chance. But the actual reason why I'm choosing this skill is the fundamental Forceful Arrow improvement, because as you see, this one allows us to knock back non-allied enemies if they are close, and considering they will be running to us all the time, so we really want this kind of crowd control. And if they collide with another enemy, both will be knocked down for 1.5 seconds. It is possible to choose Heartseeker over it because of the insane bonuses for critical strikes and stuff like that, but I chose this one because of the vulnerable status and because of the stun, so it's more like playing safe. And sure, you can ask, and what about Puncture? Because Puncture seems to be the best ability here. Well, yeah, but it's most effective from close to middle range, and we're gonna be trying to fight from bigger distances. Anyway, the core skill that we're using here is Penetrating Shot. It deals a lot of damage, goes through enemies, and with the upgrade, the Enhanced Penetrating Shot, it deals more and more damage for each enemy it pierces. And there is also yet another improvement, the Advanced Penetrating Shot, which slows enemies, and it is a kind of crowd control. It is also great, especially with the fact that allied enemies will be knocked down for 1.5 seconds. It is a good add-on to the fundamental Forceful Arrow, because, you know, the fundamental knocks down regular enemies, and the Penetrating Shot knocks down allied enemies. So it means in this situation all the enemies will be knocked down, and you'll be just shooting at them. The third skill that we are using is Call Traps. We jump back, throw call traps on the ground, they deal damage and slow enemies, and with a methodical call traps upgrade, they would deal cold damage that chills enemies. So basically we need this to keep distance. And also those enemies who will be standing in your call traps will be getting more damage for each second that they are standing there, which is gonna be a lot. And now moving on to the next thing, it's Weapon Mastery, which is absolutely must-have passive if you're using a crossbow. Frankly, I believe this is a must-have for pretty much any build, but for crossbows especially, because it's 15% increased critical strike damage. For bows it's also must-have, I guess, because 12% increased damage to vulnerable enemies is also very good. So maxing this out. Next we're taking something for survivability. I prefer to use Concealment here because it gives Unstoppable, and we can escape death when stunned because it goes to stealth for 4 seconds. And it gives us energy too when you enter Concealment, and we kinda need energy regeneration for this build. And a skill that breaks Concealment will always be a guaranteed critical strike. And we're dealing insane damage with critical strikes, so this one is also good. But usually I just keep Concealment and use it when I need to escape death. There are reasons to use Dog Shroud instead of Concealment, but since it is pretty much the only skill that gives us Unstoppable in this build, I've decided to stick with the Concealment anyway. Now, speaking about passive upgrades, the first one is Exploit, where dealing extra damage to healthy and injured enemies, which will happen quite often, and the second one is Malice, that grants extra damage to vulnerable enemies. Next thing we have is Shadow Imbuement, and we choose it for 2 reasons actually. First of all, we may want to kill enemies a little bit faster, and with a Penetrating Shot, you know, you will not always hit all the enemies, and so Shadow Imbuement helps here. And besides, we need Shadow Imbuement to make more enemies vulnerable, but the most important thing is we want to necessarily take this passive. Each time you kill an enemy with shadow damage, you generate 30 energy, and we're about to kill enemies with shadow damage a lot. And I mean not only with Shadow Imbuement, but also with our ultimate, but we'll talk about it later. Other passives that I took here were Precision Imbuement, just, you know, for the sake of the critical strike chance, and improvements for damage versus chilled and frozen, because numerous enemies will be chilled and frozen in our call traps. So now ultimate, again, we're using it to restore energy in different ways. This build kinda lacks energy regeneration, and so we're taking Aftermath. And this way, each time after using the ultimate skill, we restore 75 energy, and also every time when we kill an enemy with Death Trap, we will restore lots of energy. So that's the main reason why I took it. Plus with this upgrade, it pulls enemies into Death Traps. So I just drop Death Traps, in fact, keep distance, and the enemies which are already slowed down, they are pulled back into the traps. As for the key passive, I'm choosing precision because we're using marksman skills all the time, so we're getting increased critical strike damage, and after getting 5 stacks we'll have a guaranteed crit with 40% increased critical strike damage, which is of course absolutely insane amount of damage. And now a few words about items. To be honest, this build works well with different kinds of items. I personally love this one. Whenever penetrating shot damages an enemy, 2 additional arrows split off to either side. They deal 35% of original damage and do not split. Basically, I like to have it on the amulet, just because you know the main weapon you might be changing quite often. On the other hand, if you're not changing the weapons often, you might as well use it here. Another good idea would be taking a few items for defense, because, you know, sooner or later enemies will get closer to you. For instance, I like to use this one. When hit when not healthy, a magical bubble is summoned around you for 5 seconds. And while standing in the bubble, a player is immune. It can only occur once every 90 seconds though, but it will help you out in critical situations. So specialization, it's combo points. So we're generating 3 combo points, sending penetrating shot, that with 3 combo points not only deals more damage, but actually has an 80% lucky hit chance. So in a nutshell, damage is insane with combo points. And now about Paragon. I actually invested a lot of combo points into critical strike damage with core skills and overall and core skill damage, just because the principal part of our damage will come from the penetrating shot. Additionally, I think that exploit glyph is good if you have it. And now basically, how is this build played actually? Pretty easy, I'd say. We start by hitting enemies several times with base attack, then we set an imbued penetrating shot. If they come closer, we jump back and use call traps. So what we do, we mainly try to keep distance all the time and just hitting them and watching the awesome crits. However, sometimes we'll face some problems. For example, if you fight in a limited confined space, or a far more common situation of nightmare dungeons, where you'll be confronted by enemies that don't take damage from large distances. And exactly for these moments I have death traps, for these moments I have concealment, for these moments I have this helping bubble, but still, our damage is insane. If we get stunned, we just use concealment, go into shadows and heal ourselves, and then keep on fighting. And then again, if you're fighting a boss that you have problems with, or for example you fight a world boss, it might be a good idea to switch from forceful arrow to heart seeker. At least for this fight, you don't need to refund all the skills. You just want a couple of changes, invest here, refund here, you don't need to change all of them, just several. And that's pretty much enough, so maybe you will have to spend some money, but it will make the fight much easier because your crits will become enormous. And against a single target you will see an insane amount of damage. But all in all, this build really works, even in nightmare dungeons where enemies are much higher level than you are. If you stay focused, attentive, and if you're not dying, you'll be cleaning them extremely easy. Maybe not as easy as with some melee builds, for example like this one that you see on your screens now, the one with flurry and double imbuements, but still quite easy. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for your attention. Bye bye!